Hello, good people. This is Steve with A Father's Devotions, and this in the morning before I go to work again today. So I'm in kind of my work stuff and all of that, not dressed up in any great way. I actually do clean up fairly nicely. If you put a suit on me and tie things like that, I actually look pretty good. Um, this is very heavy on my heart, and again, I don't speak as a prophet or even a watchman or any of that stuff. This is just my opinion, but at the same time, I feel compelled in my own foolish way, probably, to tell people what I'm thinking and feeling at this time. So I titled this devotion rant, and again, this is for you, Katie and Audrey, my daughters. This is a father's devotions. I title it "Get Out," and it comes more or less from just a growing feeling that I have that are really going to change, and I think quite soon. And the evangelical churches of this country, this is also to who this is for. And I recognize people probably could care less and they think that this is nuts, and that's fine. You can take this, what I'm about to tell you, you can pray about it. Please do always pray about it, because this might just be me, but I feel compelled first and foremost to say that if you're a missionary, whoever you are, and you're from America, that's your country of origin, and you happen to be serving in the Far East, say you're maybe even in China, Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, even Guam. I recognize that's a U.S. territory, but we still have missionaries there. If you're serving even in New Guinea or Australia, it might be a good idea for you to think about coming back to the mainland or the United States, if that's your country of origin. Now, I recognize the Lord may want you there, and so you need to pray about all of that, obviously. But I think that we're going to face a time in the not too distant future when there's going to be some kind of a blockade or a defeat for our forces in the Pacific. That is, the forces of the United States in the Pacific, to where if you are in these countries, I think you stand a good chance of never getting back to the United States again, at least during your lifetime. That's what I feel compelled to tell you. And this may extend as far out as Australia, democratic, strong Australia, with the Sydney Opera House and all of those places. You may not even be able to get out of Australia. And my daughter went on a missions trip several years ago, actually about a decade ago, to Australia, where she was there on their eastern coast. But we have missionaries there whose origin is of the United States. But I'll just say it, and I know this sinks me and it's nutty, but I think China and friends, that they are putting the final plans together for something that's going to be going down in the Pacific. And I think that this will also affect our homeland here in the United States. And I don't think it's very far off. And again, for the second time now, if you're a missionary in those parts of the country, if there are people listening to this in the United States who have family, friends, people in their churches that are missionaries in that part of the world, that is, in the Far East, and this extends out, I think, also to Australia, maybe even New Zealand, you may face a situation fairly soon, and when that is, I don't know. I think once again, and I've heard other people say this, but we see and know in part. And that's all I can say. And again, this may just be me. This may not be the Lord. I'm just going to say that. All these people, I speak as a prophet or a watchman. Well, maybe you do, but I don't have that confidence in what I say. But I do feel at the same time compelled to tell you that if you have family and friends that are out there, they may face a situation where they can't get back to the United States, where there's some kind of a blockade, maybe mixed in with a military defeat for the United States, to where we can't get you home anymore. I am reminded, and I'm sorry, this may happen. I don't know, maybe around this fall, early next year, somewhere in there. That's about all I can give you, and I may still be full of hooey. But I am reminded, now I'm moving on to what I saw in the news earlier this morning, that Donald Trump and his team, which now include Robert Kennedy Jr. I mean, he brings a lot of people with him. He's part of Donald Trump's team now. It's just kind of funny that as we get closer to the election, the sides are really beginning to bulk up and define now. I mean, you can see this. You have Elon Musk, you have Donald Trump now, you have Robert Kennedy Jr., you have, Tulsi Gabbard, and just numerous other, I think, past Democrats who are looking at this and saying, what's happening with Biden and friends and what they are doing, regardless if we're Democrats or not. This is going to put the final nail in the coffin. And so these people, and I think this is good, but what I'm trying to say is that I think even in the continental United States, things are going to get bad. And I'll back up. But I'm reminded of an article that I read earlier this morning when I got up, that apparently there was a verbal and or physical altercation. This is unthinkable, between Donald Trump's security and people at Arlington Cemetery, because apparently Trump's team wanted to film in an area where some soldiers have been laid to rest recently. Now, maybe I'm getting some of this wrong, but there was some kind of an altercation there because the people at the cemetery didn't want them to film there. And maybe this is, the fault of Trump and his team. I'm not, saying that these men are angels either, but the point that I'm making is that this kind of stuff is really in many ways, or was in previous years, unthinkable. There is hatred and unthinkable vitriol. I think that's the right word, right? Right underneath the surface now. And I think that we are headed possibly for some horrific times now that will frighten people, even real macho, tough people in this country, as we get closer to this election. That is internally what may happen in this country. I mean, the sides are organizing now, kind of like the North and the South, back in, 1860, just right before the outbreak of the Civil War. And just as many politicians, thought that the Civil War wasn't going to be any big thing, I think you have people thinking the same thing now. And I think that there's a possibility that what's about to happen in our home front may be far worse than most people think. And I think that at the same time that these things are going to happen, what will really be the cherry on the sundae, on the vomit sundae, will be what China and friends may in fact do in the Pacific, and maybe even, I don't know, I hate to say this, on our home soil, may make all of this stuff, and even the stuff that's happening now in Europe and the Middle East, pale in comparison relative to Americans. I'm not saying relative to Europeans or, Israelis or things like that, but I think that things are going to get very horrific. And I'll just swing back to what I said originally. If you know people who are in the missions field and they're serving in the Far East, even in Australia, even in westernized, heavily westernized Australia, friend of the United States, ally of the United States, you might want to talk about maybe informing them that there is a coming danger to the security of those countries that they serve in. and they may not be able to get out and come back to the United States. You may not see them again. You may not see these people again. And I know that's unthinkable. I know that. And again, if you're a missionary and you're called to be in those countries and you feel, the Lord really wants you there regardless, then stay there. Who am I? Who am I? But if not, I would consider perhaps what I'm saying here. Reminded of Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, which I think as a missionary you'll have to do, and as people on the continent of the United States are going to have to do, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. I think that has to be, at least for me, that has to be the verse that we're going to pray over and over again, and that's going to have to be the way our hearts are. Because I think things are really going to fall apart, not just internally for us with this debt and riots, and I think militarily some moves are going to be made now against the United States and against our interests that we may not be able to stop. I hope people understand that. This will be like perhaps World War II, like December 7th, 1941. But I think in some ways it will be worse. I know that's unthinkable with Netflix and Fords and Chevys and malls, movie theaters, popcorn, Walmart. We just don't think in those ways. America has been the biggest player on the economic and therefore more or less on the military block since really the 1870s. President Grant. It was really about a decade after the Civil War ended that we pushed England out of the way as a number one economic power. But I think those things are going to change. I think that there's going to be some kind of an assault on us for that place. And people want to look at this as just driving down the left side of the road as opposed to the right, mere human convention. I've used that example before, but I don't know what other example to use. I don't think it's going to be like that. Good and evil exist. And some countries, though they are not perfect because they're in the fallen world, are better than others. And I think that we're going to discover that in unthinkable ways. But again, I'll go back to what I said. If you have friends, family, whoever, people who are being sponsored by your church, who are missionaries in the Far East and even in Australia, you might want to talk to them, unless they feel really compelled to be there, about maybe coming back to the United States. And you might want to begin memorizing Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. I'll say it now for the second time. And lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. Paths, plural, right? Because we are many paths. Man's complex. We're in God's image. So there are many things that we do. But I think that's going to have to be the verse for us, at least for me at this time. I think that you're going to see things unravel internally. And again, the cherry on the sundae, I know I'm repeating myself, it will be probably what's going to happen to us. I don't know, with China and friends. It's that kind of a thing. And I think most people aren't really looking at that. That's my message, and I might as well finish this up. So with that said, ladies, my daughters, Audrey and Katie, God bless you both.